Good morning, Teachers on Fire, and welcome to another edition of Saturday Morning Teacher Talk, going live here at 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 11:30 a.m. Eastern on YouTube. Welcome to the show if you're joining me live and if you're joining me on the replay or on the podcast for the audio-only version. It's my mission here to review some of the very best posts from Education X that I spotted throughout the week. So let's jump right into it, shall we? I've got this post lined up from Natalie Vardabasso. Let's put this one up on the screen. She says, "If you know me, I'll always speak up when I see oppressive assessment practices. For instance, if I'm in your space, you'd best be ready for me to have something to say about," and then she jumps into the following thread. Let's cue up the music. She says, "Turning grades into a system of carrots and sticks." Yes. "Using the gradebook to punish misbehavior." Amen. "Implementing costly norm-referenced tests to reinforce the myth of average." Okay. Yeah, on board with that one. Aligning classroom assessment design with standardized tests." Okay. So teaching to the test is part of what I hear there. "Using assessment data to rank and sort kids. Collecting standardized evidence at a standardized rate. Multiple choice methods as summative assessment." Isn't it interesting that for many of us, I know for myself in my undergrad university experience, that was the norm in my intro psych and intro sociology courses. I remember that well. "Communicating feedback as a ratio of right versus wrong." I like the sound of this one. I'd like to see a little bit more about it. So Natalie, I'd love to hear more about this one. I actually think that, Natalie, if you're watching or listening to this, each one of these points could be its own blog post or perhaps a chapter in a book. Just saying. Let's keep going. Organizing learning evidence by traditional school tasks. Homework, quizzes, tests, assignments, etc. Okay. I would like to hear more about this one as well. I'm not 100% sure I'm tracking correctly with you on this one. I think what you're getting at here is you'd like the evidence organized by learning target and curricular standard, not by these artificial categories. And if so, I'm on board with that as well. Allowing testing companies to prey on fears of learning loss to sell their products. I know we had a lot of debate about this idea of learning loss during and after COVID. She says, to wrap up this thread, "These practices are antiquated, harmful, and not aligned with the purpose of public schooling to ensure high levels of learning for all students." What a great thread. If you're looking for it, you can find it at Natabasso, and she posted that on October 24th at 9:57 a.m. All right. Thank you again, Natalie. I was hesitating for a moment. I wasn't sure I did that right, but I think I'm sharing tabs correctly. Let me take a look to see if I am missing anything. Okay, let's move on to the next tab. This one, also a post from Natalie. Again, I promise this won't be entirely the Natalie show, but this post I thought, gotta share it, gotta feature it in the podcast. She says, "It's a beautiful thing when the research validates a shift in our practice that gives us work-life balance. There is one such shift that is completely in our control, one area we are spending way too much time for little impact. Stop grading everything students do." Stop grading everything students do. One of the blog posts that I've written in the past starts out with a quote from a student that said, basically, "What was the point of me doing this if you're not even going to grade it? What was the point of me doing this if you're not even going to grade it?" Think about how significant that is. That student is operating in a wages mindset of learning or wages mindset of assessment, meaning that students do the work and teachers pay them using grades. And so he didn't, sadly, very sadly, and I include myself in the fault for his flawed thinking here. But sadly, he was convinced that everything he did required a grade. And that was fair, by the way. That was fairness. That was equity and justice in learning and assessment. And that's tragic. I think if students come out of school with that understanding, we have let them down. Let's move on to the next post. This one from Monte Syrie. I'm going to go with Syrie, and someone in the audience needs to help me or listening to the podcast. He's a well-known poster here on X, and I have a feeling somebody in my audience is going to be able to correct me here on the pronunciation of his last name. Or the man himself. Let's try that. Anyway, Monte Syrie says this: once upon a classroom, I got annoyed, even angry, when extracurriculars took kids away from my classroom. My classroom. And then I got over myself. Now I embrace now I embrace kids' other experiences. I applaud you for this, and I wish more teachers could get on board with that as well, Monty. This idea that when the volleyball coach comes and takes my kids, or my kids again for their volleyball game or volleyball tournament or whatever it might be. I'm just using volleyball because it's in season right now, but whether it's soccer or ultimate or whatever the sport might be, let's not be annoyed and irritated or begrudge whatever it is that's pulling our students away. This is part of their learning experience, and they are growing all kinds of competencies and building relationships in those settings. Those are valuable experiences. I think this is such a good take, such a good perspective on these other extracurricular activities. Moving on in the show to Jason Kennedy. You'll connect with him on X at Let's Quit Teachin'. No G on the end of that. He says, adults in schools, we will, all caps, we will make an impact today on two things, whether we want to or not: relationships and learning. Before we enter the room, choose the impact you want to make and act intentionally. After we leave, examine the impact we made and get ready for tomorrow. So a couple key parts here to me. I like this lead statement. We will make an impact today on two things: relationships and learning. That's very true. That's very true. We have off days where we're not 100%. And this is not piling on or guilting teachers in any way. I hope you don't hear that, Teachers on Fire. But I think it's important to recognize there's no day where you do not make an impact, right? There's no day where your impact is simply neutral. Our students are looking to us for encouragement, for smiles, for love, for knowing them, for seeing them, for affirming their role as learner. And we have those opportunities every single day to build relationships, to teach well, to help students learn. And then I like this last part of the tweet. He doesn't just leave it there. He says, after we leave, examine the impact we made and get ready for tomorrow. And maybe this is just a lament, but I feel like as educators, it's hard to find that time to reflect, isn't it? Examine the impact we made. I think maybe we do it subconsciously on the drive home. We just sort of recycle the events of the day. But yeah, take time to examine impact and think through what went well, what didn't go well, what do we want to change going forward. That's a really healthy part of the teacher life, I think. If you're just joining us, I'd love for you to say hello in the live chat. Let me know where you're coming from today. And I would love to say hi to you. Let's keep this going. Next post here on X is from Josh Ogilvie. You'll find him on X at Josh Ogilvie 4. He says, using conversation as approach to assessment today with students, I learned from a student that they see assessment as a way for teachers to confirm they are not capable. All negative language used in assessment. We unpacked this and highlighted strengths they had a tough time believing, but it's a start. That's tragic. Once again, I'm going to use that word again. That's tragic if our students only see assessment from teachers as an opportunity for teachers to highlight their shortcomings and weaknesses and errors. That's a very sad, bleak view of assessment. And perhaps that is earned, perhaps that is deserved, but I like that definition. You've heard it. You've seen it if you've spent any time on X. The definition of assessment as sitting beside. And I extend that sometimes quite literally. There is something about sitting beside a student that really changes your perspective on the room. But when students understand that assessment is only about finding their weaknesses and shortcomings, guess what their response will be? They won't want assessment. I think of teachers in our response to administrators coming into the room as well, that we're the same. We're wired the same. If our sense is that the observation on the part of principals or education leaders, whoever is doing the observation, if we sense that the purpose there is simply to find the shortcomings and identify weaknesses, we're not going to relish those visits. We're not going to enjoy them at all. And so I guess as a side note for principals and administrators, let's make sure that our feedback is really strengths-based, that is really building on what is already there. But yes, for teachers, what are we doing to encourage? What are we doing to build up? What are we doing to really highlight the strengths that we see in our students? From AliceKeeler, I'm going to end with a couple of technology posts, as I like to do. And I suppose this one is part technology and part philosophy or part ideology. But she says, using quizzes, and by the way, you can follow Alice at AliceKeeler on X. She says, for me, using quizzes, she's got at quizzes. And by the way, I should stop. I apologize for stopping so many times. But quizzes, if you're listening to the podcast, is spelled Q-U-I-Z or Z. I-Z-Z. Okay, so there are 3 Z's or Z's in that word, and it's the name of a company. This is one of the many quiz platforms that are out there. So I've got to get that cleared up before I continue. Alice says, for me, using quizzes is not just about saving me time grading. Instead, it breaks the cycle of get to the bottom of the page. Keep working on it until you're successful. So quizzes has in its settings a game mode, and I'll be very honest, I've explored it, I've tried it out quite recently, but I have not used this in the classroom yet. I just don't do a lot of quizzes with my technology classes. There's not a lot of time, but they do have a great mode that is called Mastery or something like that. I think it actually is called Mastery, where you're not just giving students a set of content and saying, answer these 20 questions and generate a score. Go through these 20 flashcards and show me your score or post your results. It's no, continue to work through the content until you've demonstrated mastery, until you've gotten to a place where you are able to answer every single question correctly. Or I suppose you could probably set a certain quota if you want to for the student to answer correctly, whatever that looks like. But I like this idea of mastery, and it reminds me of a math platform that I use in my math classes, which I'm not teaching this year, but I've used many times in the past, and it's called IXL. If you've taught in the middle years, if you've taught math, you are probably familiar with it, I'm guessing. And the same idea is true there, that students are working through problems, but they're not free to just move on to the next whatever until they've demonstrated a level of mastery. Students don't always like that, by the way. They would rather just answer the 20 questions and move on. And so when a platform like Quizzes or IXL keeps students on platform until they can answer all the questions correctly, students aren't always on board with that, but it's better for them. It's better for them, and I tell them that often. Moving to the last post that I wanted to highlight this week on X, let's scroll up a little bit. We've got my friend jrsowash. You can connect with John at jrsowash on X. And if you're joining me live, make sure to give this video a like and say hello. Would love to hear where you're coming from this morning. But John says, did you know that you can create an appointment schedule directly from Gmail? No, I did not realize this, John, although I have a feeling this feature has been around for a while and I have just not been paying attention. So what got me is the screenshot. Let me finish reading his message first. He says, look for the calendar icon when composing a message. This will let you set your availability so that the other person can pick the time that works best for them. If you are familiar with a platform or an app called Calendly, you will have perhaps received messages from people with invitations that allow you to choose a time slot in the sender's calendar. You're choosing a time slot directly in their calendar, which saves that back and forth between two people. And John is sharing here a screenshot that purports to show the exact same thing, sort of the Calendly option. Now, I knew that Google Calendar offers this through Calendar. I did not realize that you could embed this directly in a Gmail simply by hitting the calendar icon at the bottom. So again, I have not tried this. Once I get off air today, I would love to send an email to myself between accounts and give this a shot. One thing I would like to know. Hey, Josh Tovar is in the house. He says, buenos dias, hermano. Yes, good morning to you, sir. Great to see you. Josh Tovar, great, passionate principal from Texas. Always a blessing to see that brother here. So what I would like to know, going back to John's screenshot, is when let's say I send an email to Josh Tovar and I give him a set of 10 time slots to choose from. Let's say that he doesn't open the email for 2 days. And in the meantime, I actually schedule some appointments for some of the time slots that I originally offered to Josh. Will those be removed or grayed out dynamically in Josh's email? Do you know what I mean? Or when he opens the email in 2 more days, will those time slots still be available? And will that create a conflict in the booking? That's what I would like to know about that feature. But it looks really good. And I have a feeling it does update dynamically if I know Gmail at all. Hey, I see a number of viewers in the broadcast today. Would you take a moment to say hello and let me know where you are coming from as I start to wrap this thing up? I want to let you know, Teachers on Fire, I'm excited to announce that as of this morning, I am getting back into the interview game. It's actually been about 2 years, if you can believe it, since I've been doing live streamed interviews. I'll be going at the top of the hour in about 12 minutes with Jeremy Jorgensen. I'm not even sure I'm saying his last name correctly, so we will clear that up before the show goes live. But I am going live at 9 a.m. Pacific time, 12 p.m. Eastern, with Jeremy Jorgensen from Wisconsin, 8th grade teacher, passionate writer, and reflector on his own learning. I know you're going to learn a lot from him. That's going to be in a separate stream, but I hope you can join us for that. And I hope you can join me every week for these interview conversations. Josh Tovar, you're going to be a guest, my friend, if you are willing, if you are available. Would love to chat with you here on the program. He says a couple of things. That is for sure. I'm horrible with emails. Yes, well, some weeks I feel like that too. Sometimes I'm on top of them. Other times I see a number like 450 or something terrible. The number of unread emails in my inbox. So it really depends on the week. I appreciated being on your show. Yes, well, I believe I had you as a guest on a panel, did I not? Maybe it was one-on-one, I suppose. But what I want to do for Josh and for the listeners, I will say what I want to do is a better job of converting this video content into audio content that will appear on the podcast. The podcast has plenty of listeners, lifetime average of over 1,200 listens per episode. And so why not? Why not share it there? And I think 2 years ago, I was just starting to run out of steam to get all of that done, but it really doesn't take a whole lot of time. And on that note, as I wrap up, I want to mention, as I have before, that Josh Tovar, I'll put his name up here on the screen again. Josh Tovar is a co-host of a weekly or very regular show called Unlock the Middle. I try to tune in when I can. And he and his friend, his co-host Dean Packard, interview principals and leaders from across America on the regular. And Josh, one thing I will say to you and your co-host is I know you publish regularly here on YouTube and other platforms like Facebook, but what about taking that content and putting it on the podcast for all of our lovely audio-only podcast listeners? I think that is a step that I would be happy to help you with. And you, my friend, if you are tuning in as another teacher on fire, perhaps considering your own weekly broadcast, feel free to reach out. I am happy to help. And I am a firm believer that high tides lift all boats. There's none of this competition business between education podcasters. Teachers on Fire, it is such a joy and a pleasure to engage with you, to learn together in this context and in others. And I appreciate you tuning in today. If you're still with me, thank you so much. Would you give this video a like and subscribe to the channel? And I'll see you again, same time, same place next week, 8:30 Pacific, 11:30 Eastern. We'll go over the top posts on X from the week, and I will be listening as well, or I hope you will be listening as well. That makes more sense on the podcast if that's where you join me on your commute or during your workouts. Thank you so much. Andrew Cavey, brother, says listening in from Nanaimo. Thank you so much, Andrew. Teachers on Fire, thank you again for joining me. I'm going to say peace out. I'm going to be connecting with this week's guest, Jeremy, off stage, and then I'll be coming back live here in 8 minutes. See you then. Bye-bye.